I love Protech knives. I have a pretty sizable collection of American-made pieces from Dave and the gang, and if you've been around knife YouTube for any amount of time, you will have no doubt heard almost exclusively high praise for the Anaheim, California-based manufacturer and their knives. Well, there's a reason for that, and simply put, from my experience, they don't know how to make a bad knife. They just can't do it. Take, for example, if you will, my very first ever Protech knife. This. The Protech Emerson CQC7 Tanto, an automatified version of an Emerson design by the same name. And for those of you who are somehow unaware of Emerson knives, their designs are almost exclusively geared towards tactical or hard-use situations. Both kinds of situations that I almost never find myself in. But in the case of this knife, it was a big moment for me. Prior to this, the nicest and/or only push-button side-open automatic knife that I had handled was a Boker Mini Strike, and let me tell you, this and any/every Protech automatic is an entirely different animal altogether. The looks are very basic at best. We've got the usual hard-coat anodized aluminum handle, which in my case is bright friggin' blue. So blue, in the right light, it actually hurts my eyes. The push button on this model is actually centered on the handle, which is not normally the case. Usually the button is offset a bit towards the back spine of the handle. We've got extremely minimal hardware that has this nice sandblasted finish to match the blade finish, and no, they are not Torx heads, they are good old-fashioned hex screws. Which doesn't bother me much considering I have a million hex keys laying around, and I don't ever see myself taking this knife apart. The pocket clip is also done in the same kind of textured sandblast finish, and although it is not the near-flawless Protech deep carry clip that I adore, it's good enough and works well enough to keep the carry as easy and as smooth as possible. We've also got plenty of jimping on the handle to aid in the grippiness department, along with this jimped kind of pseudo-Emerson wave-looking thumb rest area at the back of the blade. Kind of ugly, but, you know, I get it. And of course, the blade. I love a good Tanto, and this one is good, but not for the reasons you would expect, but we'll get to that a little later. This is also available with a traditional drop point style blade, but for the Tanto here, as far as looks, I mean, it's about as Tanto-y as a Tanto can be. Nothing game-changing, you know, just straight lines all around. And the 154 cm steel has also been sandblasted to match the hardware and the clip. And I love 154 cm. Visually, I could live without the giant Emerson logo plastered across the show side of the blade, but whatever, not a deal breaker. Now then, on to the action, and well, as I said before, prior to buying this knife, my only experience with side-open autos was with a Boker Mini Strike. That's about a $40 knife, and though the Strike is a nice, snappy, little pint-sized budget auto, it did nothing to prepare me for this level of aggression. You push that button, and you had better hold on for your life. Long story short, it scared my cat when I first opened it the day it arrived, so much so that I found him under the bed upstairs 2.5 hours later. It also hit the blade stop with such violence and ferocity, and at such a velocity, that when all was said and done, I was barely holding onto the handle at all with my palm and my pinky. This is a Protech. This is not a toy. That blade spring is seriously pissed off for being so tightly coiled up for so long. It wants to let loose. It wants a full release. And if you aren't paying attention to what you are doing, it will launch the knife clean out of your hand and across the room. Might even stab somebody. We don't want that. This thing hits like a truck, and yet it's still reasonably easy to one-handed close. Not sure how they pull that off, but, you know, Dave and the gang, man, they got some tricks up their sleeve. So all in all, the action is exactly what you would expect from Protech. As for that blade, I purchased this piece pretty early on in my serious knife collecting, and I either didn't know what I was reading or wasn't reading closely enough, because I purchased this expecting a typical Tanto blade, nice and slicey, right? Wrong. This is a chisel ground Tanto, which means the edge is only sharpened on one side of the blade, not on both like pretty much every knife you've ever experienced. So when I went to do the first cut test, I was very confused, and well, a little disheartened for a while, because a chisel ground blade just can't ever be as slicey as an edge beveled on both sides. But, big but here, 2 T's. What I have learned over the past year is that there are a ton of normal, daily tasks where a chisel grind like this is pretty much the perfect tool for the job. Scraping in particular It's hard to comprehend how often in my life I've come across scraping tasks. Sure, it was sharp out of the box, and yes, this will work fine in most basic EDC, use cases, and yes, it will pass my pointless paper cutting test. But the best example I can give to you for the best use case for this blade, we recently took on a long and arduous rehab project on the hardwood floors in our dining room. They are 110 years old, and they had been covered with carpet for years, decades probably, and prior to that, linoleum for a few more decades prior to the carpet. The linoleum was still there, stuck to the hardwood, and the only way to get it up without trashing the wood was to painstakingly scrape the decades-old linoleum and the adhesive up just a few inches at a time. And I have to tell you, I really don't think I could have done it if it wasn't for this knife. It did the job better than the purpose-made tools I had run over to Lowe's to pick up. I spent extra money on tools that I didn't need, and I find myself putting this piece through some of the hardest use tasks, and a lot of them I probably should not be using a knife for in the first place, but the CQC7 it works so well and has never batted an eye. So if I need to scrape away old paint or chisel out some tired old grout, this is my go-to. And the 154cm, along with that hardy blade stock, is just held up to it all without any issues. And Emerson himself claims that the reason for the chisel grind is to make it much easier for field sharpening. Yeah, sure, but I am not in the field very often, and I don't see myself using a piece of brick or a rock to bring the edge back on this anytime soon. And finally, the ergos, well, as is usually the case for knives designed for use in tactical or extreme situations, the ergos here are just wonderful. The wood rehab job, that was a week-long affair. 3 to 5 hours a day for 7 days. And gloves or no gloves, the CQC7 here, it was just wonderful in the hand. And I was really putting all of my strength behind each and every scrape. Blisters, yeah, sure, but the handle never slipped out of my hand, and even some of the most awkward grips imaginable, I never had issues with discomfort. And the handle is a good size with tons of room for any size hand. You can choke up, choke back, so top marks as far as ergos go. Now then, all that, long-winded nonsense aside, where does that leave me with the Protech Emerson CQC7 Tanto? God, I love it. It was my first Protech, so it will always be special to me. But it is also my go-to hard-use knife in so many situations. Yard work, grab the CQC7. Retiling the bathroom? Grab the CQC7. Oh, your scrape plate on your car is falling off? Well, cut it completely out with the CQC7. At retail, it'll run you between $160 and $170, and I'm okay with that price for an American-made automatic knife with a great warranty. Comfortable in hand, swings open with unquestionable authority and reliability every single time, no questions asked, and, it comes in blue. So, until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye now.